Hey everybody, and welcome to my first of 4 videos about the Pentax K-S1. This video is going to provide a general overview of the camera. It's going to include some thoughts I've had in the last month of using it and sample photos I've taken with this exact camera, many of them taken with this exact lens. The second video, and in the description below, there's an index, so as I read off the videos that are in this series, if you'd like to advance to a different video for a specific topic, you can find that link right below. The second video is going to talk about the interface elements, the buttons and the dials, and what the different buttons and dials do. The third video is going to talk about the menu system. So we'll go into the menu system and we'll talk about each and every menu item in this menu system, and I will tell you what each and every menu item on this camera does. And the fourth video in this is going to be specific for shooting videos with your Pentax K-S1. So without any delay, this is the Pentax K-S1. It is a digital interchangeable lens SLR. And what that means is that the lenses can come on and off of the camera's body. It has a digital sensor in it instead of film, and it is a single lens reflex style camera, meaning that there is this single lens that collects both light for the photo as well as before and after the photo, the viewing through the viewfinder. And that works because light from the lens bounces off of this mirror here into the pentaprism, up to the front, back to your eye, and then you view the image right before and then after you take it. This camera has a 77 segment multi-mode meter. Alright, so imagine that you were in averaging mode for your meter setting, and we'll get to some of that later in the video, but I'm going to tell you right now how the metering mode works. Imagine that what you're seeing right here represents what you're seeing in the viewfinder of the camera. The camera divvies this scene into 77 units, each one of which contributes to the overall meter. Now they're also, I believe, color sensitive. And by taking the data from the 77 different units through here, the camera determines what the best exposure is. And that's one of this camera's strong points. The sensor, the image quality, and the meter are very, very good. The camera has built-in shutter speeds from 30 seconds on the slow end up to 1/6000th of a second on the high end. And it has a viewfinder magnification of 0.95x. What that means is that the size of the image in the viewfinder is 95% the size of the image that will be on the film with a 58mm lens. I believe it's 58 millimeters. It also has 100% viewfinder frame coverage if you don't wear glasses. And what that means is for contacts wearers and non-glasses wearers, people with perfect eyesight of whom I'm jealous, whatever you see in the viewfinder is what's going to be on the sensor. And that is extremely, extremely rare in a camera that's designed for the entry-level user. Based on my usage of this, and I wear glasses, I'm going to guess that with my glasses I can see about 90 to 92% of the frame, maybe a little bit more than that, but there's a little bit of frame cropping for glasses wearers. This has a 20 megapixel digital sensor for very high quality images. As you'll see later in this video, this camera takes stunning, stunning images. This camera's target market is an entry-level user, especially casual camera users and first-time DSLR users. It has scads, absolutely scads of what are called scene modes, and we'll see those in later videos. And those are preset modes that give you certain parameters for taking images. This camera has more of them than any other camera I've ever seen. But that said, even though it's got all of those silly scene modes in it, it still has a number of advanced level features. But because it's an entry-level camera, it's also missing some advanced level features. And in the general thoughts at the end of this video, I'll talk about what some of those are. It has scaled down movie capabilities compared to other contemporary advanced level Pentax cameras. For instance, it has only an onboard microphone and does not have a microphone jack that will allow it to take an external stereo microphone. Additionally indicative of it being an entry-level camera, it does not have weather sealing. Don't take this camera in the rain. And it also has only 11 autofocus points. That's still a lot, and it is still more than enough to do everything you need to do. There's 11 points scattered in a pattern. You can see them on the viewfinder screen, which we'll see later in this video. But it's not as many as some advanced level cameras. Also, this camera is available in 15 colors, one of them which is all white and gray. And the color schemes are based on fruit, textile, scenery, and candy. This also has a new interface which is designed to be more novice friendly, specifically in this rotating dial. And as we'll see in the third video, the menu system is refreshed compared to even the recent K3 and 645Z cameras, so it has a more novice friendly and streamlined menu system. Additionally, indicating that this is an entry-level model, it has only one control wheel and no LCD screen on the top of the camera. So I know this camera says Pentax on the front of it, but it's made by Ricoh Imaging, assembled in the Philippines, and was released in 2014 with production ongoing as of the filming of this video. It was preceded by the K500, which was a very limited run, one production run only camera released in 2014. It's concurrent with the K50, the K3, and the 645Z. Now, if you have your Pentax K-S1 or are interested in getting one, we're going to look at all of the different things on this camera and talk about what the little buttons and such are. Okay, so looking at the top of the camera, here on the edges we have the camera strap lugs, and the camera comes with a strap that you just put through those lugs. We have over here on the side of the pentaprism the flash release button, and it's a purely mechanical button, so it works when the camera is on or off, and it gives you a little bit more control than with an electronic button, and it also, being mechanical, is less likely to break if there's an electronics issue that could cause an electronic release button to fail. Here we have the flash hot shoe and the flash hot shoe cover. On either side of the prism we have two little vertical lines. Those are the stereo microphone inputs. There's one microphone on either side of the pentaprism. Here is the speaker that it has for playing back video while it's still on the memory card. Here's the model indicator, K-S1. This is the AV and ISO selection button and will be used for changing features in modes. It's what's called a context-sensitive button. It has a different use depending on your mode. This is the control wheel here, this silver wheel. This is the green button. The green button does not have a specific function but can be assigned one of multiple functions depending on what you would like it to do, but it only gets one use. Here is the on-off movie selection dial. This is the shutter release in the center of it. Over here in this little strip we have 5 LEDs. They have 2 brightness levels. We'll see that in video 3, how to adjust those. And they stay on part of the time. Their main function is to count down the self-timer so that you can see it counting down from in front of the camera. They're also stylish. This is an IR port for a remote control release. It is only on the front. Here is the light for your autofocus. This is your lens release button, and what it does is there's a pin right here that locks the lenses in place, and you should be able to see it going into the body when I push on that. Here are the contacts which allow the camera to communicate with the lenses. This is the lens index dot, and what that means is that on your lens there will be a red dot, and you line up the red dots to mount the lenses. On this side here we have the manual and autofocus dial. In manual mode, the autofocus screw is retracted into the body, and in autofocus mode it protrudes from the body. It is still safe to mount and unmount lenses in autofocus mode because the screw gets pushed back into the body very easily. However, I always prefer to put a camera into manual focus mode before mounting or unmounting a lens. The camera's sides have a few features as well. On the side with the grip, we have an HDMI and a USB out port. These are good for connecting the camera to a TV to watch a video. It is not, to the best of my knowledge, something that can be used for tethering. Also, you have a USB port. I will tell you, in 4 years of using Pentax digital cameras, I have never once used the USB port. It is always faster to transfer files from the camera to the computer by simply putting the SD card into the computer. On the back of the camera, over here on the left, we have the live view and trash button. When the camera is not in live view, that's what you push to get to live view. When you're playing items, that's what you push to hit the trash, to delete an item. This is the Viewfinder cover, which you can remove. Here's the Viewfinder, and it has accessory grooves around it. And right here is a diopter adjustment that I don't even know where it's supposed to be anymore now. It's a good idea to keep the Viewfinder cover on your camera because that diopter adjustment is very easy to move, and if you move it, your images will focus differently in the Viewfinder than they do in real life. Here's the LCD screen, which will display images, live view, and your menu. You use your play button to get into your play menu, your menu button to get into the menu. Here is your mode dial button, and this allows you to switch between different shooting modes. Each item on this dial is a different shooting mode, and we'll go through what each of them are in the second video, and I'll explain what they do and how to use them to the best effect. It seems daunting because there's a lot on there, but it really isn't all that bad. This is the info button, which will allow you to access different parts of the camera and different functions. This orange LED lights up when the camera is writing data to the SD card, so you know not to turn off the camera while it's still recording something to the SD card. This pad in the middle has an OK button in the center. That's a general OK button. Does all the things that an OK button would do. The ISO button on top allows you to change the ISO and also doubles as an up button when needed. The flash button allows you to control flash settings and works as a left button when needed. WB stands for white balance, and it allows you to adjust the white balance for different shooting settings, and we'll talk about those in the second video and what they do. It also functions as a down button when needed. And this one right here on the side that's got the squares going off to infinity and the circle with a cowlick, it's your shooting mode button, and that allows you to determine what shooting mode you're going to be in, and also functions as a right button when needed. And up here on the top we have a little index marker that tells you which shooting mode you're set to. This last button is your autofocus auto exposure lock button, and we'll talk about that again in the second video as well. I know I keep saying we're going to talk about it in the second video. The second video is really for the in-depth usage of all of these things. This first video is to help you understand how your camera is laid out. Here's the bottom of the camera, and what we have here, we have the serial number, and it's not sequential. This was not the 6 millionth one of these made. It is not sequential within body styles, but sequential over time. Sequential-ish over time. This is the tripod bushing, which you would connect a tripod or tripod plate to. And over here we have the battery chamber and this odd little black thing. We'll get to that in a second. The battery chamber opens that way. Here is the battery, and here is the memory card. And then there's this little black port that I think is for an AC adapter, but I have not found any mention of what this port is for, or of an AC adapter accessory. So this camera's got some pretty great special features for an entry-level camera. The first one is continuous shooting for up to 100 frames in low speed mode at JPEG. And that's a lot of continuous shooting for an entry-level camera. That's also somewhat dependent on your SD card, and you'll notice the SD card issue being much more prevalent in high speed mode. It has a huge viewfinder compared to other entry-level DSLRs. Like I said, 100% frame coverage for non-glasses wearers and 95% magnification. Compared to other entry-level DSLRs, which are like 82 to 88 to 90% frame coverage with 88 to 92% magnification, this camera has a much larger, much brighter viewfinder that will make composing images much easier than other entry-level DSLRs. In fact, it's worth noting that the viewfinder on this camera is larger and has a better magnification than the old K-S1 cameras, which were the flagship prosumer cameras of 5 years ago. The entry-level camera that Pentax has made here is in many ways better than their old flagship cameras. This also has a pentaprism viewfinder, and what that means is that the viewfinder within here is a solid piece of glass, a pentaprism. Instead of being a pentamirror, which is multiple mirrors, prisms have a brighter image and don't lose as much light. And this has a small enough prism that it doesn't add much weight. A pentamirror will have a much darker viewfinder, and it will be harder to focus and compose your images. Many entry-level cameras have pentamirror viewfinders. This has a pentaprism, so that's a huge advantage for this camera. This also has a sensor with no anti-aliasing filter, which I believe is unique to this camera in the entry-level market. That's a feature that's shared with the Pentax K3 and 645Z, the two flagship models that Pentax is making. That's a very high-end feature that will do a lot to improve image quality. There is an anti-aliasing simulator built into it if you want to use it, but having no AA filter makes the images a lot sharper. This also has stepless shutter speeds for optimal image exposure, and what that means is that if the meter, the 77-point meter, says I need a shutter speed of 1/1115th of a second, no problem, it can do that. It doesn't have to do 1/500th or 1/1000th or 1/60th. It can do any fraction of a second from 1/6000th up to 30 seconds. This also has a tethering availability with a special Wi-Fi flu card that goes into the memory card port. It's a lot slower than a standard SD card and holds fewer images, however, so unless tethering is a must, it's not a great idea for this camera. If tethering is a must, really, it's better to look at a K3 or a 645Z, which are more tethering friendly. That said, tethering is still typically an advanced level feature. This also has context-sensitive menus, and that means that the menu starting point does not reset, nor does it pick up where it was last left off. So if you go into the menu and you go to page 3, when you go back into the menu, it doesn't necessarily jump to page 3 or page 1. Instead, the menu opens to the menu items that are most important to the current shooting mode. And that can be a really nice feature, and it does that in the background, so you might not even realize it's going on. In fact, I didn't. So next thing we're going to do is take a look at how to change lenses, batteries, and memory cards on this camera. Changing the lens on this camera is pretty easy. All you have to do is push down on the lens release and turn the lens anti or counterclockwise and remove it. To put the lens back on, you just have to do the opposite, only you don't have to push the button. One weird thing about the kit lens is it comes with this plastic ring that goes on the front. I have no idea what it's for. It keeps falling off. I have almost lost it a half dozen times in the last 2 weeks. Changing the battery and changing the memory card are very easy. All you have to do is open up this door, which is spring-loaded, making it very easy to get into. To access the memory card, you simply depress it and slide it out. The memory card label faces towards the back of the camera when you put it in. You cannot put the memory card in incorrectly, so that's nice. To release the battery, There's a lock there, and the battery springs out as well, making it easy to remove. You don't have to turn the camera upside down and risk dropping the battery. It uses the standard rechargeable DLI 109 battery, which is the entry-level grade battery for entry-level cameras. Unlike previous entry-level bodies, however, this does not have, such as the KR, this does not have a large enough grip to have the AA adapter that can go into the camera instead. So you're stuck with these rechargeable batteries, but they're generally okay, but this camera is a definite battery hog. To put the battery in the camera, you put it in with the contacts facing the back of the camera and just slide it in. It also only has one way to go in, so you cannot insert it the wrong way. All right, so here we are looking through the Pentax K-S1's Viewfinder. You can see it right there. And so what you're looking at right now are it doesn't have individual boxes for the autofocus points, but it does show you the zone where the autofocus is located. So inside of those two sets of brackets is where the autofocus points exist. And there's also a crosshair one. There are multiple crosshairs focus points, but there's one right in the center as well. Those brackets also tell you a little bit of information about metering. Between the two parentheses is the spot meter zone, and between the large brackets in the middle is where the center-weighted metering zone is. And you can see that there was a little red flash just there. And when you're in manual mode, manual focus mode, that will tell you that something is in focus. It won't tell you where, but it will tell you that something is. If you're in autofocus mode with a Pentax lens, then those red lights will light up on the autofocus point where something is in focus. All right, so let's take a look at what this is actually telling you. So on the left, you can see it says MF for manual focus. There is no AF to say autofocus. If the flash is up and powered on, that flash symbol will illuminate to let you know the flash is about to go off. The 1/25th is your shutter speed. For that, it's 1/125th of a second. f5.0 is your aperture, letting you know that you're set at f5.0. Now I'm in aperture priority right now, and that line underneath it means that if I rotate the command dial, I'm going to change the aperture setting. If I switch to shutter priority, the line moves to underneath the shutter speed, and lets me know that the command wheel is going to change the shutter speed. If I go to manual mode, right now the line is underneath the shutter speed, but if I push the AV button, which will allow me to adjust the aperture, now the line moves underneath the aperture. You saw that little handshake appear there? That means that the image stabilization is set to on. The line above the image stabilization is your light meter. So right now that's telling me that my image is very underexposed because the bars are far to the left. If I change the shutter speed or aperture, the bars come closer to the middle, letting me know now my image is properly exposed. Right there it says ISO, and next to that is the number 100. That's telling me that my ISO is set to 100. And if you're in automatic ISO mode, that will change to let you know what your ISO is. And underneath it says RAW Plus. That lets me know that I'm taking RAW images with JPEGs as well. The KS1, for the month I've had it, was a camera that I at times loved, others hated, and then both loved and hated at once. When I loved it, I was in the mindset of the user for whom this camera is intended. Casual photographers, people looking to record family gatherings, and beginners stepping into their first interchangeable lens camera. If you're in one of these groups, this camera is going to be a great match for you. So when I thought like the intended market, I loved this camera. When I thought like myself, I was not as in love with it. I will say that for each moment when I used this camera, I was keenly aware that it has a simply amazing image sensor. How amazing? If I could, I would switch the KS1's image sensor with my K3's 24 megapixel sensor. The KS1 has, simply put, the best digital imaging sensor I have ever used in a camera. The dynamic range, color trueness, clarity, and exposure latitude stunned me every single time I downloaded photos to my computer. There are some things that they've done well with this redesign. Chiefly, I think the mode dial is a nice way to select modes for users who would be interested in the silly number of modes this camera has. I hope the dial never shows up on a flagship camera because I like it, but I don't want to have to use it. However, this camera's intended audience could benefit from it. It does serve to make the interface a little bit easier to use for people who haven't become familiar with it. Okay, so that's actually the only thing that I think they've done well in this redesign. So it's fair to say that there is one thing I like about this camera's interface. One major drawback of the Pentax KS1 is that it does not have a microphone port to help with video, which means all you have is the mono microphone that's built into the camera's body. So unless the person or whatever you're videotaping is very close, you're not going to get very much audio if you want. That does leave one other option though. Another option with this camera is that you can always just use the video to record silently and then dub sound in later. But I will say that having brought the video footage back from the field and running it on my computer, the microphone does a substantially better job of recording audio than I expected it to, and it recorded a lot more audio with more volume than it sounded like it was doing in the field. The KS1 falls flat, for me, on ergonomics, construction, and features. The grip, this silver thing, is slippery like a generation's old cast iron griddle. The grip's shape, with its angles and short jut, are hard to hold. Even my fiancée, whose hands are relatively tiny, felt that the K3 was a better fit in her hand. She did not, in any way, like how this camera handled. Holding the KS1 is very awkward. For me, this camera has gotten so small as to be difficult to use. I did figure out a way to make it easier to hold. The big problem with holding it is how slippery this silver thing is. Even under the best conditions, it's not conducive to a good grip. So with some rubber cement and some sandpaper, just glue the sandpaper with the abrasive side out onto the grip, and you'll have a pretty good grip to hold on to at that point. Of course, it really looks bad. Also for ergonomics, the focus mode switch is very poorly designed, and switching from manual to autofocus quickly is tricky at best. In fact, I often found that I thought I'd switched into one mode, but it was halfway in between and doing neither of them well. Also, as an advanced user, I like having more features and more buttons. Having to dig into menus, even the first menu screen, for features that I use regularly was aggravating, and I missed a number of good shots because of it. But the features, the missing features. Most people who this camera targets won't notice these things, but here are the absent features I really missed. A remote control IR port on the back of the camera. I mean, why is it only on the front? Are people using the remote only to take selfies? The back is clearly the more useful location, because then you don't have to reach into the front of the camera to use a remote control to take a picture while it's on a tripod, which is awful if you're using a wide-angle lens and keep getting your fingers in the remote control in the shot when you're taking the photo. That's interval shooting. Especially as a shooting mode, but even as a menu selectable item, it would have been nice to have this. Standing behind the KS1 for 30 minutes, 6 times in one day, taking a photo every 15 seconds with a remote control while watching my wristwatch secondhand, was not a great experience. The photos turned out well, but it wasn't enjoyable to take them. And a separate live view and delete button would have been great. I almost deleted countless photos trying to get back to live view from the play screen. For me, those missing items are deal breakers. For most people, they wouldn't be, and their absence would not even constitute a bump in the road or something worth note for this camera's intended audience. And if you don't need those things, you will love this camera and you won't notice that they're not there. So, would I recommend this camera? Yes, actually I would for the right buyer. The construction quality is superb, and the camera is solid and does not feel flimsy or plasticky, and that alone sets it apart from much of its direct competition. It won't grow with someone's photography as much as other cameras like the K50 or the K3 will, but it's a great starter camera, and it's easy to use and learn, and it can do everything that the K3 can do, though with some added work for some of it. And in a way, that added work actually makes the results more pleasing because it was harder to achieve them. The K-S1 is also not as daunting as the K3 or K50 to use, and it still gives the users access to the vast majority of the great features on those cameras. It gives users a family of amazing lenses to choose from, and a sensor that takes images that are better than any other APS-C body Ricoh is making right now. So, yeah, if you're looking for a good way to get into interchangeable lens cameras, or a nice beginner camera, or an inexpensive option, this is a great camera to choose. And really the most important thing is the image quality and the sensor. And to that end, this camera will never let you down. So that is the end of the first video in my series of 4 videos on the Pentax K-S1. Some things not to do with this camera before we leave. Don't touch the sensor. You can see the sensor if you take the lens off and open up the mirror. Don't touch it though. Touching the sensor is a really good way to ruin it or have blurry spots all over all of your pictures. Also, don't touch the shutter, because if the shutter closes while you have a brush to clean the sensor on it or your finger on the sensor, if you're violating the first rule and touching the sensor, you will almost certainly ruin your shutter. Don't touch the mirror that's behind the lens, because the mirrors are surface coated with their reflective silver, and your finger oils will remove the silver and make it very difficult for the autofocus and manual focus to work, because there will be less light making it where it needs to go. Don't let this camera get wet. It's not weather sealed, it's not a professional grade camera, and if it gets wet, you will risk shorting the camera out and ruining it. Don't store your camera or lenses in your car. The heat and the cold will ruin the cameras. They will break down the oils in the mechanisms that allow them to operate properly, and also damage the electronics. And lastly, don't store your camera in a plastic bag or box, because moisture will get in there and cause fungus growth or corrode the camera's electronics, ruining the camera. So thank you very much for watching this first of 4 videos. If this video was helpful, please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know I'm on the right track and making content which is educational and beneficial to you as a camera user. If you'd like to know when I have more videos that are going to come out about other cameras, about digital and film photography, and lots of different subjects like that, please just click the subscribe button below and you'll be notified when those come out. If you have any questions about this camera or digital photography, or comments or suggestions for future videos, please leave those in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about responding fairly quickly, and I'm always happy to hear your guys' thoughts, especially suggestions for other videos. And one last thing, thank you guys for watching. Hey everybody, and welcome to my first of 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 4. So I know this camera says Pentax on the top of it, but it also says Ricoh on the side. On the front of the camera, over here, we have a little strip that's hard to see that contains LEDs. Those LEDs light up when the camera is on, and they stay illuminated all the time. They have 2 brightness levels. We'll see how to access that in a later video.